Good afternoon, mamas. This is Devin with Professional Home Educator Homeschool House Calls. We are with some of the most awesome mamas on the planet. Susan from Homeschooling Supermoms, Cindy LaJoy, and Natalie Vecchione.
Vecchione.
Vecchione. Oh my gosh, you know I do that. I do this. I practiced this afternoon. I practiced.
It's a hard one.
Oh my gosh. And the thing is, I get it because my maiden name is Drawn, but it's spelled Draughon. So it's like you only say the first two and the last two. And so I totally get it. So I hate when I mess up names. But anyway, I do know her. We actually know each other. So. But I'm so glad you are here today. We're talking about Cindy and Natalie's new book. I read it last week. It was awesome.
It is. It's awesome.
It is. And I will tell, I actually told somebody, I think every homeschool leader needs to read it because if you don't know or have ideas of how to work with your special needs parents, it will give you some great ideas. So.
Yeah, I actually think every homeschool parent should read it because of the fact that we're not going to let you guys speak for a few minutes. We're sorry. We're going to take your interview. So I think every homeschool parent should read it because of the fact that I love their heartfelt stories at the very beginning. They each tell their heartfelt story, and every parent, if not every parent, most parents at some point experience some kind of challenge, some type of self-doubt. And as you read their stories, you know you're not alone because, you know, Cindy's got this huge blue collar homeschool Facebook group and I look up to that and I think that's really cool. And you think that she hasn't experienced any challenges. And it's like she's so open about this, and you will be able to connect and relate to their stories. And the book is just jam-packed with resources. I just loved it. And I think every homeschool parent should read the book, especially those with special needs. But I thought it was absolutely excellent.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Susan. It was definitely a labor of love. And going back through the tickle file in your head, you know, of all the experiences we had gone through and reminding ourselves of just how hard it can be. I mean, there's no doubt that that both of us and so many other parents have gone through, man, the trenches. We're in the trenches with these kids. And I don't know about Natalie, but I have a sense probably because we talked about so much, but not this in particular. How many specialists don't know what to do with some of our kids? And particularly, I think in our case with fetal alcohol syndrome, we have a myriad number of disabilities that fall underneath that umbrella, and having somebody to add it all up and tell us, hey, have you thought about this, was a little hard to find. And it leaves you alone. It leaves you with experts telling you things that you know aren't really actually quite true because it doesn't quite fit your kid. And it's just an incredibly lonely journey sometimes. And our friends out there are not alone. Even when it feels like it, when you're in your home and you're in bed and you're crying because you think you've totally failed your kid. We've all been there. And some of us have made it to the other side and we're reaching backward. I think, Natalie, don't you feel like that?
Absolutely, Cindy. I mean, when we first started talking about this book, first of all, I knew that I just had this connection with Cindy because of our journeys. And even though, you know, she runs Blue Collar Homeschool and she does all these things, and our journey was like a little tiny apprenticeship, I felt like I was like, we need to share our stories. They're different, but in so many ways they're so similar. And we both really, you know, we talked about this. We both shared, I think, the most vulnerable parts about us, which is being a homeschool mom to teens with developmental disabilities. I mean, we could have talked about something really rosy and really, you know, but we talked about that. And we shared our hearts, you know, we shared our journeys. However, I think that what we pray that our book does is give families hope out there. No matter what the diagnosis, you know, part of our book is educating about FASD. That was really a mission for us, but we really wanted to end on hope, and that hopefully this book is just the beginning, because when you get to the end of the book, then you'll find out about what we're doing and what we're planning. So yeah, it really, I felt like specialists didn't get it at all. Honestly, I felt like the ones who got it the most were people like Cindy and people that we met, 20 years ago on, again, Yahoo groups or whatever.
Yeah.
The people who understood us the most were the people who are walking in our shoes, in our journeys.
There's nothing like lived experience and the wisdom that comes from that. And often it's the wisdom from trying things and screwing it up big time. And you can spare people that experience sometimes. I know that I tend to, maybe I'm harder headed than most people, but I tend to learn more from my failures than from my successes. Maybe it's just because they really stand out to you when you bomb, right? And hopefully that reading our book can help some parents shift their thinking a little bit as well and think more broadly about possibilities and definitely hope. I think sometimes, especially when your kid gets to be about 14 or 15, you begin to think, oh boy, okay, so we're losing time now. Now we're running out of time. It seems to me in my role as a special needs academic advisor at True North Homeschool Academy that I tend to talk to parents at about 15 years old. It seems that's when the awakening comes to the parent that, okay, remediation is just not going to do it. We're not going to get a whole lot further. Now what? Mm-hmm. And that's probably the scariest time, I think, Natalie. I don't know about you.
100%.
14, 15, and you're getting the idea. Okay.
And that's
room for improvement on some things now,
And then that's when, unfortunately, if you don't know about whatever your teen's diagnosis is, that's where you start seeing secondary conditions, things like, the depression and the, punching the holes in the walls and things like that, because they want to fit in a world where they can't. And that's where Cindy and I really shared our heart. And this book really is about reinvention, and as a parent of any teen, not just teens with developmental disabilities, but if they're not fitting in the world that they're trying to fit in, then it's time to make them a new world that they can master and show their strengths, show their skills. Yeah. And I really think that Cindy and I both did that in two completely different ways, but we did that. We saw the future for our kids and we're like, no, that's not going to work, and really we prayed and we were just like, okay, we're just going to do something really bold and really different. And that's really, I think, a lot of what our book we share about.
Well, and it's about helping a parent adjust expectations to the child they have, not the child they thought they gave birth to or adopted, not the child they thought they were living with at 7 or 8 or 9 when lots of possibilities still exist because you think we got time to catch up. We'll get there. And sometimes for some kids, it just doesn't really ever happen. And then the parent is left completely struggling and the child feels like a total failure. Thus, then the parent feels like a total failure when you're homeschooling. I think sometimes public school parents can avoid pieces of that, I think, because they send them to the experts. And we did public school for a few years. And you think that they know better. They can fix this. Mm-hmm. And they will know far better than I will. And then failure after failure, and they get further and further behind. And then you bring them home and you homeschool them. And sometimes it takes a lot of time to have success. And sometimes you never achieve success in some areas. And then you beat yourself up as if you created the problem and you didn't. But when you have both the learner and the educator in a place that's lacking light and hope, it becomes hopeless. One of you has to pull out of it and have hope, and it sure isn't going to be the kid usually. Usually it's going to have to be mom or dad. I don't want to leave dads out in this, who bring light into the situation and reassure their child. It may look different, but we're still going to find something for you. You've got so much to offer. And our book is also about, I think, focusing on the strengths and not ignoring the weaknesses, because that's really important information and data as you start figuring out what could possibly work for your learner. But when you focus too much on it, and often up until that 15, 16-year-old stage, that's what's going on because you're trying to figure out what's wrong, right? So you're naming all the things that don't work right. You're talking about them with your kid. You're talking about them with therapists and other service providers. And so the conversation constantly kind of leans towards the negative and the less than helpful, although it can be, because sometimes the label explains a whole lot and can give you direction. So I don't want to discount that. I think that's important too sometimes. Not that I'm a label person, but the information that comes from the label can be important. But shifting thought to skills and attributes and great qualities and focusing on that, and then how do you take those and mold them into something and fit them into a career or a job setting, that's a more positive perspective. And lifting parents out of that and helping them see, oh, it's a really dark tunnel and it's long, it's big and long, like Wile E. Coyote, right? But when you get to the end, suddenly the light bulb goes on. And then you begin to look at your child totally different. Go, wait, maybe they could do this. Or if I stop thinking they have to look like everybody else, maybe this is possible. And I know that Natalie and I both readjusted expectations over and over again in order to meet our kids where they were at instead of where we wish they were. That process is actually pretty painful. It can be hard. And dreams go out the window. What we hope to do is help them bring a new dream in the next window. Then hopefully we succeeded with the book. I hope.
I think y'all did.
I think so.
Yeah. You.
I love the statement. And I'm sorry, I don't know who wrote this chapter. I think it was Natalie who said, but different isn't bad. And that's what I think a lot of parents, homeschooling parents, or just parents in general, need to remember. Just because something is different and isn't quite working the way you thought it would be, it doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means you need to adjust a little bit. Because I found the book very inspirational, very uplifting for parents that need to be refreshed and renewed in their soul. This is a great book. So I hope that they'll check it out. Because like I said, it's great for homeschooling parents or parents that are addressing children with special needs. And I thought it was really neat.
Well, and isn't that the whole point of homeschooling? Is that you can do it differently. Our tagline at Blue Collar Homeschool is a different kind of homeschool excellence. And homeschooling is supposed to give us that freedom to do whatever our kids need to meet them where they're at, to offer whatever it is that feeds them and nurtures their spirits and allows for some success, as well as working on, everybody's got to do math, right? All the hard stuff has to still be worked with and focused on. But instead of beating your head against a wall, homeschooling allows for all of that shift in thought and bigger ideas and more expansive sort of understanding of what it means to be an educated person in the world. And if we don't take advantage of that, and if we only view different as bad, Susan, like you were talking about, we're missing the whole point of why we're doing this. If you take parents of traditional learners who don't struggle, and they're working with their learner and they go, let's see here, Sax and math's not working so well. Let me try teaching textbooks. We don't think a thing about that. That's normal. But when it comes to our special ed kids, we sometimes don't free ourselves enough to do that and to go outside. And yet we don't realize everybody else is doing the same thing with every other learner too. If they're doing well with homeschooling, they don't feel married to something so badly they can't move away from it. But I do think sometimes, I don't know about you three, but didn't you sometimes need permission? Didn't you kind of sort of need a nod in the direction of, it's really okay if you shift. It's really okay. If it's not working, move on. And sometimes I know that most of the time I got that online, like we all talked about, I got that from my companions on the journey who were virtual for the last, dozen years. And it matters and it helps. And so maybe we'll give people the affirmation, change it up. It's okay. It's really okay. If even we do that, I think we've been successful. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Natalie?
100%. And it's going to look different for everybody. I mean, what I did definitely looks different than what Cindy did, looks different for you ladies. But I really think that, and I agree 1,000% with Cindy, that I think as parents of teens who learn differently, young adults who learn differently, I think we beat up ourselves more because we've been beat up so much. And we're still in that mode of, we just got to, and again, one of the many hopes of Cindy and I in writing this book is just, again, sharing that it's okay. We hear you. We've been there. It's okay. And let's just make a change. We'll show you how we did it. We did it different ways, but let's just show you how we did it so you can see that making that change and saying, my kid wants to be a dog groomer, and that's fantastic because my kid's going to be the best dog groomer in the world. That is great. I mean,
Mhm.
I'd rather have my son or daughter be the best at what they want to be, and what the skills that God has put in them, than something that I feel like I or the community or, anybody else is saying, and our kids have heard that for so long. We also, like Cindy, we public schooled for a while, we private schooled for a while, we even hybrid schooled for a while, and homeschooling just really gave us that freedom. But it took a while for us to, even with that freedom, it took a while to say, wait a minute, we can change it up even more, and that's what we just want to reflect to people, especially like Cindy was talking about, how our kids have to do math and English and stuff like that. Well, the last 2 years of our son's homeschool, everything was related to carpentry. So, when we did math, it was about carpentry. When we did science, it was about learning about physics. And so if you take their passion or their strengths and really tie it into actively, not just reading about it, but actively, if you tie it into their homeschool journey, they're going to, like Cindy says in one of our chapters, they're going to have that buy-in. They're going to have that, okay, I can do this. I'm going to do this. And when that happens, it's really awesome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Natalie, I think you make a really good point too about parents of special needs learners are beat up. Frankly, we're not believed. We go to experts over and over again and we try and describe what's going on. And sometimes it's really hard to nail it down. And then often we're accused of being overprotective. We're accused of seeing things that aren't there. We're blown off. Not always. Sometimes we find some really good experts to work with, but very often it takes going through a few to find the good ones who really know what they're doing. And then you get so discouraged and you feel like it's just impossible. And it's not. And it's going to be, if you're going to succeed, I will say it will necessarily be different. It has to be, because your learner's different. And I mean, every kid is anyway. We all know that. We do know that. But there's a bigger difference and a wider gap sometimes for some of our kids. And so therefore we have to work a little differently and a little harder, probably as parents and educators, to be more creative and help our children imagine a future that sometimes we can't even imagine yet, but we pray and hope that it's there. And we know there's something. We're all stumbling around in the dark trying to figure it out. But we do eventually find it if we keep at it. And if we free ourselves to think differently. If we don't free ourselves to think differently, you probably will never get there. And that got to quit beating your head against the wall trying to do it traditionally. And we had totally different journeys, Natalie and I did. We've really done things, differently from one another. Yet the commonality was we did it different. We freed ourselves to do it differently. And if we can help a few parents see that different isn't worse, different equals success. I think when you get caught in the academic piece of it, different feels like failure because it feels like lower reading level, lower math level, whatever the case is. But different isn't bad. And a phrase that I have said at home for years and my kids could finish for me the moment I said the first word is, hard isn't bad, hard is just hard. And the minute we remove bad, like we talked about just a few minutes earlier, the minute you remove bad from it and the connotation that different is bad, the whole world opens up to us. And hard doesn't equal bad. It's just hard. And every person, disabled or not, learning challenged or not, we all have hard. That's life. I'm sure all three of us or all four of us could sit here and name each week bad, hard things in our life that we have chosen not to label as bad, but that are hard, and our kids learning that early helps them keep at it. That just because this particular area is hard for you doesn't mean that is over here, but it is for me. You may be, our kids with learning challenges excel in all kinds of areas. And when we begin to focus on that, instead of finding the diagnosis, finding the reason and trying to make them fit into it, once we really have enough knowledge to let that go and work with it rather than against it and not be brought down by it, it's a whole new world. And it can be for our kids too. And I hope that brings hope to people because I believe it down to the core of my being. Everybody can have a purpose. Everybody has something they can do if we are creative enough in our thinking. And our kids aren't going to have the capacity to be as creative in their thinking as we are I mean, and that's got nothing to do with learning disabilities. You think about kids trying to find a career, and they have no idea the numerous jobs that are out there. They know teacher, policeman, fireman, nurse, they know basic ones, but they don't think about, uh, a lathe, somebody who uses a lathe to make table legs. They don't think about, all of the different types of behind the scenes jobs that aren't, underneath the main category of job. You think about the medical profession, and they may think of nurse or doctor, but they're not thinking about radiologists. They're not thinking about ultrasound tech. They're not thinking about the hospital cleaners and the higher level of janitorial service that has to be provided there. That's really imperative, as COVID has shown us, right? They don't know the subcategories of big fields. And it's the same thing with special needs. They don't have enough knowledge of the world to be able to name, different things that their skills might take them to. And that's where our wisdom and experience can take a look and plug those holes and go, okay, so if we're good at this and this and this, there's all these careers that might be possible. And then which one really is logical? And our kids really need us to be able to do that work for them. They don't have enough experience in the world to know what's out there and available. So training ourselves to think differently is the first step. Then we help our kids think differently. And maybe this book will inspire people to think differently and open up a whole world of possibility to them with their kids, regardless of whether they're special needs or not.
So Cindy, you and Natalie both thought differently, and you learn about this in the book. And I was wondering if both of you could kind of share just a nugget of what you did differently, because I want people to understand, dive into this book and learn more about it. So if both of you would mind sharing that.
Natalie, why don't you go first, because I haven't shut up.
I think for me, what I did differently was I thought of something. So I knew that trade school really wasn't a good option for our son. And I explained why, in our book that particularly with our son's diagnosis and it just wasn't a good fit. We actually tried it a few times and I was just trying it because everybody said, oh, he wants to be a carpenter, trade school. I was like, wait a minute, and so when, the last attempt happened and I was like, okay, thank you, God. I get it now. I was like, okay, how did people used to learn about, carpentry before trade school? And, I thought apprenticeship. And I was like, okay, well, how do you do that? I'm just going to make one. So I really just, it was like Cindy said, out of desperation, I had reinvention. So I thought, okay, you know what? I'm just going to cold call about 50 and email about 50 local carpenters and woodworkers and just be honest and explain, our son learns differently, blah, blah, blah. And say what our goal is to have him shadow a carpenter or a woodworker one-on-one, like twice a week or so. And I sent out probably about 50 calls and emails. And again, in the book, I think we got 4 returns. And out of those 4, our son's current teacher, who's fantastic, we really feel it was God orchestrated, that God just put Will in our son's life. And he was just like, how can I help? And it's been a million times better, I think, than trade school, because our son's teacher is teaching him like these, and I go into it a little bit in the book, these things that like you wouldn't learn in trade school, things like, oh, if you take some sawdust and you use it on a lathe, it'll actually make something smoother. If you do, stuff that we never thought our son would learn. And, when we did that, when we were just like, okay, how does somebody do it in another way or in another time or whatever? And that's what we did. So I think just being able to step back, especially, it's hard when you're in desperation because you're just like, you just want to like make it happen. But for me, it was just stepping back and saying, okay, what's the best way our son learns one-on-one? Okay, how can we do that? And just think out of the box. And our son's teacher, he's still with them. He still goes, once or twice a week. And it's the happiest time of our son's week because he just gets that one-on-one time, and they do things that are just so amazing. So, if that's how your child or your teen learns best, then maybe find a mentor or find somebody, who he or she can apprentice with, or, and no matter what, whether it be art, or again, I go back to dog grooming, but, like dog grooming, or, it's something where he or she can just really soak in that experience, So for us, it was like, no pun intended, but it was like going old school. We were like, hundreds of years ago, that's how people learned. They were apprentices. Okay, that's how we're going to do it. So I really think if I could share that use that desperation, not as a use it, but not as a deterrent, but use it as a motivator for you to say, okay, I'm just going to step back and just throw some ideas out there. And that's what we did. And it's still been a blessing. He's still, to this day, and his teacher said, he can stay with him as long as he wants. And that, to us right there, that's success for us.
I loved also how you opened your mind. I mean, because as I was reading, you have had two apprentice teachers. And when I read your story, it was like, oh, I don't know that my mind would have been as open as yours was. And you just opened up your mind and said, oh, for the first teacher, oh my goodness, my first avenue didn't work, but right in front of me is this new teacher. And it was amazing to me how many these two men who have been the apprentice instructors for your child were so willing to say, yes, let me understand your child's disability and let me create things to help them. And it's like, sometimes we forget the wonderfulness that other people can bring into our lives. And we oftentimes don't open our minds because it is a scary world today. You have to be careful with how vulnerable you are. But I loved how your eyes were wide open and you said, no, this is a good person. This is a good person. And they're willing to learn about my child's learning styles and they're willing to help. And I just thought, that is really neat. Because oftentimes, I got to tell you, sometimes I forget to open my mind and see what's right in front of me. And it could be that potential wonderful teacher for your child.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really neat.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I would like to also throw in, both Natalie and I have kids who may never live fully independent. Mm-hmm. We are not pretending that these are careers that will lead to independence for children. I shouldn't say children. Young adults at this point. They were kids at one point, but not every young adult is going to be able to live independently. Some are going to need some help. Some are going to need a lot more help. Some can still do something productive in terms of work and make a decent paycheck and come home, but can't really quite make it on their own. We aren't declaring that, but everybody needs to have meaningful work in their life. Every single person who has any capacity at all, in order to feel like a contributing member of the world, we need to have meaningful work. It makes our life worthwhile. And so often people with learning disabilities get left by the wayside, or other disabilities, not just learning disabilities, and then they get forgotten. They get past services age through the schools, and then there's nothing. And you know what they do? They sit at home on their couch, watching TV, playing video games, and having no real life other than when mommy and daddy take them someplace, and then it's always accompanied by mom and dad. That's not healthy. They're still adults. They still have all the same desires and hopes and dreams as we do. Their living circumstances may have to be different, but they can still find ways to contribute to society and to feel like they have a place to go every day and they have tasks to do. And that's so important for mental health. And it's important to have a quality of life. None of us wants to feel like we're not needed in the world. And I don't care if you're going to live with mom and dad for the rest of your life because, like my son, I can't drive and I can't cook for myself. But I still can go and do this. And I can point to things that I do that I'm successful at. And I can occupy my time, my day, my weeks have structure to them because I have employment and I can go back and forth to work. You take all that underneath, that scaffolding underneath, and what does a person have to live for? It can be incredibly degrading and depressing. So a lot of this stuff is well beyond the fact that, I can learn a trade or a skill and I can go do it. There are a lot of other factors to this that make this so important. But The way we did it differently was we had 3 we knew would struggle to get employment. We have 3 of them with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder to varying degrees. 1 for sure, no independence. The other 2 probably can do it with a little bit of assistance here and there from us or siblings or, spouses eventually. But we did it different because also we knew we had owned a restaurant at our local airport when our kids throughout our kids' childhood. And all of them had passed the ServSafe test, even my 11-year-old at the time. We got them studied well, and we passed the ServSafe test so they could be a little more helpful at work with my husband. So we built on what they knew and what they had already had success at. And I have a daughter who absolutely loves cooking. That's what she does all the time in her spare time, and can't wait to look up new recipes. And our son, who is a whiz with numbers, and even though he has incredible learning challenges, he went all the way through pre-calc, which surprised all of us, and did really well with stuff. So he could handle all the financial pieces pretty easily. And my other daughter is the social butterfly and can handle the customer service better and all kinds of pieces of, the human resources stuff. So we looked at them and said, 3 in 1, 3 struggling brains together make 1 good brain. And so, we played on, they learned to play off of each other's strengths and weaknesses as well. So, we were in a little different situation having 3. I will not deny that we borrowed up to the hilt. But when you have 3 who may never be employed, you think really differently, and you're willing to, do the Hail Mary pass, which is what we called this really. And then we created Buckaroo Slices and Scoops, and they did that for their senior year project. And they built it from the ground up themselves with guidance as anyone. They didn't really get any more guidance than anybody else who was a kid who's 17 or 18 going to start a business would need. They did all of the physical labor. They did all the pricing, all the calculating, all the, recipe trial and error. Yes, we were standing there helping, but between all of them, they could manage to do it together. And if things just sort of grew from there. But sometimes you as a parent will have to take more risk than you think. Sometimes it's not going to be free to get your kid settled in something. Sometimes you'll spend as much as college or more. When you're looking at the quality of their life for the remainder of their life and building skills that might even lead to outside employment eventually, that's less sheltered employment, it's worth it. It's a worthwhile investment. I can tell you that when we started the business, I had planned to be in there for 2 years because I thought it'd take a couple of years to pattern and get things sort of settled and work out the bugs. But one advantage of homeschooling is you know your kids so well that we prepared that place with every possible accommodation that I knew instantly that they would need. And I'm not kidding you, less than 2 months and I was out of there. And they were able to run it almost all by themselves. Their dad has the business next door, and so he's available should they have trouble. But they really haven't had much. The process of building it also helped them gain skills before they even opened the doors. I mean, they spent a year learning how to interact socially with, product representatives. We went to food shows, and I made them go talk to all the reps in the booths and ask the questions. They learned about insurance. They had prior to that, they'd never run a cash register or anything like that. And they gained those skills. I have a daughter with dyscalculia who 4th grade math even was a stretch. But funny, when you have to do it in the real world, sometimes necessity takes over and she's able to make change, which we really thought would be a problem. She's a bright girl. She's my one who likes to cook and does everything in the kitchen so well. But that part we thought was going to be hard. But through everyday constant repetition, that piece sort of fell into place. And so we did it differently, and we went the entrepreneur route. But I think in essence, we both did it the same in terms of creatively looking at our kids, assessing strengths and weaknesses, not letting weaknesses lead. I think that's a really important point. You can't lead with the weaknesses because then you're going to be defeated before you start. You got to lead with the strengths in your mind and keep pushing those weaknesses to the side where they can be viewed again and reminded of, well, maybe that piece won't work so well as you assess possibilities. But you've got to lead with the strengths that your child has. And there are usually plenty of them if you look for them in the right way. Once we get our head out of thinking, they fail using a textbook on a particular subject. and you start looking at it as a whole, as an entire whole human being as God creates us, then you start seeing different things. I mean, our kids are not, they're not created so they can go to school. Because we're educators and that's what our lives are immersed in, and it's in our house, at our kitchen table, it's all around us all day long, all the time. And that's our job. And we take it seriously as moms or dads who homeschool. We sometimes forget that our kids are more than students, for goodness sake. I mean, and we are more than teachers. We are their parent. And if they were going to school and they came home, we wouldn't have knowledge of all the failure of every single problem in the math book. I mean, and we wouldn't internalize it as our own failure either, which is a big key part of this process. Is stop looking at failure, start looking at success, start seeing the whole kid, start looking at every little possible nugget of information that leads you to a positive purpose in the world and a skill that could be learned or grown out from a gift that they have. And then start looking at careers. And suddenly some things will pop up for you that you may never have envisioned, because you're thinking, man, they bombed on that biology and I can't teach it to them. That's a hard thing to overcome in our mind. And a lot of this is changing your thought process, I think. So, yeah. We did it different, but we did it the same. I mean, it's hard to explain, but I think you guys get what we're saying.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, I think it's great for parents that are homeschooling children that have learning challenges. And also, I found that any homeschool parent can relate to a lot of the stories, because we all experience challenges at some point. And so if you're looking to be uplifted and inspired, and if you don't want to feel alone and you have those moments that you feel alone in this journey you're on, this is a great book for you guys to pick up. And so you guys are releasing it this week.
It's
that's released.
Yeah, we actually launched it on Friday. But this week is our launch week. This is our official launch week.
Yeah. Now y'all have a companion journal that goes with it.
Yeah. So, part of this journey in working with Cindy is that I love the way, like, she was like me, where we finished the book and we're like, you know what, this is just the beginning. We thought the book would be the final destination, and it turned out it was actually just the entryway into kind of like our dreams of how we can take this. And we really view this book and Blazing New Homeschool Trails is really more like a mission or a ministry. So the companion journal, when you read the book and you go to the end of the book, and we'll tell you how you can get it, you can download our companion journal. You can visit our website, which is listed in the book. And then what you can do after that point is take the companion journal and work on it, almost personalize the book to your needs, and you can download as many journals as you want. So, if you have 3 or 5 kids, you can, do separate journals. And then what our hope is after our next big project is to record the audiobook. So that'll be coming out hopefully in the next, month or so. But what we're hoping to do is in the fall, use our website as kind of like a launching pad. So parents can start maybe either taking like some small virtual field trips to, visit Buckaroos or visit my son's, carpentry workshop or just awesome. Even just do some starting things. And then what Cindy and I hope to do down the road is to develop some classes based on the book to say, okay, how to, so like, maybe for me, perhaps, okay, how did I go from like, not knowing what to do to, okay, here's how, this is what I wrote. This is what I said. This is what we met, almost like the how to land an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Thing. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Cindy, how to build how to have that entrepreneurial 101 type of class with your kids who, they have these skills and what do they like, or what are their passions? So we really see the companion journal as part of another step in what we hope to do through Blazing New Homeschool Trails. Yeah.
Well, the companion journal gives an opportunity for the parent to really stop and reflect with a few different kinds of questions that make them think differently about what do we need to get from homeschooling for this particular learner? How can we steer it a little differently? And sometimes we're so knee deep in it every day for hours that walking away, we go, I don't want to think about it anymore. I'm done. And we don't necessarily even have the ability to organize our thoughts around a particular learner and what's working, what's not, what's possible, what's not. And so this helps a parent stop, take the time to sit down and really reflect on that particular student, or students in my case, because basically it's my whole family special needs, but and to begin to think a little differently. It helps shape that thinking to be a little more outside the box, and to steer them, begin the steering process, because really the parent is going to take it and run. It's not, we don't steer them towards particulars in that. It's about assessing and beginning to assess a little differently, sort of guiding you to think wider and more spaciously about the future for your learners. So, and also our book really, we both have kids with FASDs, but I also have other types of learning challenges in my family. And I would say that we really wrote this in mind to educate a little bit about FASD, but to cover any kid who's not neurotypical, any struggling learner, pervasive developmental delay, high functioning autism. This speaks exactly to those kinds of kids. The kids that are higher functioning than really low IQ, and yet for whatever reason, the disabilities are going to hold them back from holding traditional employment. The kids that today we look will fall through the cracks and often won't qualify for disability services. There are millions of those kids in our world today, and they are floundering big time. And in the work that both of us do, aside from this being about, our kids happened to have FASDs, but if we broaden that, and I think all of our book really, other than the beginning parts that explain what FASD is, speaks to any parent with children that just don't fit and that are at risk of not making it over the hump into employment. Parents whose kids are, like we talked about, 14 or 15, and they're going, we've done every remediation we can, and this is what we have to work with. It's not getting better. And there is a point where you start having to shift your thinking from academics in college to, okay, what's really real? What's realistic here? And it seems to be about that age. And that's when you realize, oh, employment might be really tough at all. And fear is a great motivator. So, although we mention FASD regularly because that is the challenge that we're mostly working with, I also included things in there that I used with my other kids. I have a twice exceptional son who graduated 4 years ago, who has slow processing speed, very slow processing speed at times, and has dysgraphia, and is incredibly bright and is making his way in the world non-traditionally. He elected not to go to college, and yet he's pursuing college-oriented material through cloud-based computing and coding and everything else. And he recently just passed Amazon Web Services' highest certification. He's designing websites. And if he had gone to college or even stayed in school, he would have bombed, because his writing, even though his intellect is there and his ability to read is there, his writing, it stinks. And it's never going to get better. I mean, it's just not. Mm-hmm. And that would have held him back. His slow processing speed. He would have been the one in the back of the class, not raising his hand because the thought wouldn't have come fast enough to get it out. We all know kids like that. He doesn't have some of the bigger disability challenges, but still, we really had to think differently for him. And he decided he was going to learn outside of college the things he needed to learn to get certifications, because he could do it at his own pace. He could dig into it as deeply as he wanted to, and he wanted to do more project-based learning. And I think this book speaks a lot about sort of thinking differently and thinking project-y. I'm making up a word, right? Yeah. Project-based learning, oh my gosh, that is so where it's at. It is so where it's at for every kid, not kids with disabilities. Every child learns best and retains it when they're engaged in it and they're doing it for real. And, think about cooking from a textbook. Do you learn anything? Come on. If you open up a cookbook or a textbook for high school for, home ec or something, you don't learn till you get in the kitchen and start doing, oh, wow, like burned the butter on that one. Better turn the flame down, right? I mean, all of us in every area learn better by project-based learning. And I think that our book addresses some of those pieces to help you think sort of in the ways that you could create more opportunities that are real but don't look academic, but actually kind of are. And it's translating that into academics. I think it's taking the real world and translating it into academics. And instead, traditionally, we take academics and try and translate it in the real world. And I'm sorry, that's just opposite of the way it should be for any kid, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I hope that our experiences doing that exact thing in all the ways that we did it will help parents see that they can flip it, totally flip it, and start with the project and then translate into what does that look like academically if I need to throw some academics in there. How can I take remodeling a house and create some writing projects out of that? Create, if you need to work on some of those things still, because we're not talking abandoning traditional academics, but I'll tell you what, you get a kid invested in something and you're going to get more output. I'm teaching a learner right now who is dyslexic and high functioning autistic, and he's 15 and he reads at about a 4th grade, 5th grade level. And I ask him to write, and we've all been there, and you get 3 sentences and it's supposed to be a page, right? You get 3 sentences and I'm done. I can't think of anything else. Well, tapping his strength and his interest, I said, so teach me how to talk to my son about Minecraft, because I know nothing and I don't know the vocabulary and I don't even know the point of the whole stupid thing, right? And my learner said, okay. But I'll be darned, I got a page and a half the next day. You tap what they're interested in, and suddenly the light bulb goes on, but also the energy gets invested in it. And kids like ours lose their energy. They lose their desire. They lose their interest. They become apathetic because everything is just too darn hard. And they fail, and they fail, and then they fail some more. And I don't know how many of us adults would continue to keep going back the way we expect our kids to come back with a positive attitude and real motivation when all you do is fail. You've got to incorporate things that they succeed at, whether we're talking careers or not. You have to incorporate some areas where they can have some success, or you lose their hearts. And then you're done all the way across the board if you get them to that point. So thinking of ways they can be successful, and then how do I make that academic is like one of the biggest keys, I think. Of course, I'm filled with opinions.
And they're awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know about that, but they're mine.
Well, and on that note, I have to say the book is jam-packed with information and resources.
Yeah.
The back part of the book has questions and resources and things to help make you think more. And so, yes, it tells you about Cindy and Natalie's heartfelt stories and how they thought differently, but it also provides a lot of great resources for parents to check out. And so I hope that they'll check those resources out too.
It's the book that Cindy and I wanted 5, 6, 7 years ago. It really is. And that was probably one of the biggest motivators for us to write this book, is that we didn't have it, and we knew that there are thousands and thousands of families out there that need to know what we learned.
Well, and I think, first of all, we intentionally made it shorter. So
Yes.
It could be read reasonably by a busy mom. I mean, we've both been there, and you didn't have time to blink or drink or eat. I mean, we couldn't pick some large tome. So we intentionally kept it around 100 pages, so it would be quick and easy to digest. I appreciate the fact, Susan, that you think it's chock full of stuff, because we tried to cram as much as we could in that made sense. But one of the things that we really focused on in part of the book is, so everybody tells you teach differently. What do you mean by that? How do you do that? There are a lot of concrete suggestions in there for what we did that works. We aren't pretending to be specialists at all. We just know what we did that worked for us. I know what I do that works for other families as I guide them and steer them, and they come back and tell me that worked or this flopped, because sometimes it works for one kid and not for another, right? Our suggestions aren't always going to work for every learner. But even in the academic pieces, we have, ideas and tips in there for how you can teach the basics a little differently, or thinking a little more along the line of a struggling learner. What has worked for us and what has not. Concrete stuff, not just sort of abstract, go start a business, because, anybody can say that, but what does everyday life look like, and how can you alter the environment or your approach so that your learner can actually absorb what you're talking about, regardless of their disability. There's a whole bunch of ideas.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you guys, sometimes when I get up against a wall, I'm just out of ideas. I'm not out of energy, but I've tried everything I can think of. And so sometimes someone else throwing out 3 or 4 new things to try, one of them works. And so maybe this book will serve to offer a few different ways of approaching even the academic pieces as well. And just how do you homeschool successfully with academics, a child who may really, really struggle and adapt things. So.
Absolutely. And, Devin and I, we got a question from one of our mamas not too long ago about how their learning style is different than their child's learning style. Mm-hmm. And I think that the suggestions that you have in the back of the book, these different ideas, different things to try, might be hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can't think a different way to teach because this is our learning style. And I think some of these different ideas will help trigger maybe or spark some new and fresh ideas for them to try that will make teaching a little bit easier too.
Boy, you're so right, Susan. And, I'm one of those bookworms and I'm a writer. And, if I had tried to throw textbook after textbook at my kids, I don't know where we'd be. If I had just stuck with how I learn and insisted on, but this is the way everybody does it, because that is the way. I learned the way schools teach. I was successful at school because I learned that way, but I can really see why people don't. Numerous people don't learn that way, whether you got a learning disability or not. I mean, go to your local mechanic shop, and you're not always going to find people with learning disabilities doing mechanic work, but they may have been much more of a hands-on learner than they ever were going to learn from a textbook at school. And so letting go of how we do it ourselves, what works for us, and really examining with a microscope our learner, the one we're trying to teach, and letting go of what we know works for us can be a lifesaver. I mean, it really can, but it also can be so hard because it's what works for us. It's what we know. It's what we do.
Right.
And I'm not a particularly creative person myself, actually. I think it's forced me to be a little bit, but it does not come natural to me. Creativity it's not my cup of tea, but I had to be. Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah.
On our end, our son was interested in something I knew nothing about, which was carpentry. So I, share about, how we tapped into local resources, community resources and things like that, and how honestly, for a lot of it, we outsourced a lot of it. And I think that's something that parents can also embrace too, is that if your child has the strength or the skill in something that you know nothing about, hopefully we've given some suggestions on, okay, here's how to learn, here's how to outsource, here's how to find somebody who can be a resource if it's something you know nothing about. And the other thing too is as a parent of a child who wants to learn something that's totally foreign to you, I learned about carpentry and I love it. I mean, so I learned along with my son and it was actually very cool. So that's something I think that you should be open-minded to as a parent, just like Cindy. I mean, you guys built a business from, the studs on out, so we as parents, we have to not only, look for the resources if we can't, offer the resources ourselves, but we also have to be willing to say, you know what, I'm going to learn about this too, because it's important to my teen or young adult. Therefore, it's important to me, even if it's something that I'm a little afraid of or I'm a little hesitant about. So I hope that that's another aspect of, what Cindy's talking about that we can share, that even if it's something you know nothing about, here's some ways to try it.
Well, I'm chuckling because, my son who's building websites and cloud-based computing applications and such, it's mind-numbingly boring for me. And yet, when I ask him to explain it to me in a generality so I can understand and have conversations with him, and I use those terms, can you just give me the big picture thing? Don't give me the details because I'm never going to understand it. You're well beyond anything I can grab. It teaches him something too about how to teach about what he does and dumb it down to a level of somebody who knows nothing. That's a skill they learn too, by explaining it to mom who doesn't know a darn thing about, planers and sanders and everything else, that can help, the mom learn a little bit and have those conversations, because we don't need to know all the details. At least I keep telling my son I don't need to. But he has really actually been a great educator for me in a realm that is so big and deep and hard and difficult and requires quite an intellect to understand and higher level math. And he has this gift that I think he's developed because I've helped him because I'm so stupid at this stuff. And another thing to remember is Natalie was talking about with apprenticeships and stuff as parents. Most people absolutely love talking about what they do for a living. They love to share what their passion is. Parents hesitate to approach people. I'm one of them. I'm one of them that's uncomfortable. Natalie is as bold as all get out. And you sure come across that way. But I have found that when you're talking to people about what they do for a living, their career, what they love about it, why they do it, they're more than happy to share everything. And they love having the attention of someone who's really paying attention to what they do because they care about what they do. So don't be hesitant to reach out to people. Don't be afraid to. And yeah, sometimes it may take you a whole bunch of, asking to get somebody who it really clicks with or who's interested in possibly engaging your learner and working with them. But most people will still be very happy to sit down and talk to you once about, maybe the pros and cons of a particular career, which would go for any learner, right? Not just, SPED learners. Most people will be happy to even have you shadow for a day just to see sort of what they do. It's a great way for a kid to get a taste of it and go, I want to learn more, or holy no way, I'm not doing this one, Mom, that doesn't fit. But again, probably the mom or dad needs to be the one doing the asking, but recognizing that almost everybody's flattered to be asked, even if they say no. Yeah. You're not going to, it's not like knocking on the door trying to sell a vacuum cleaner, you're going to have a pretty positive response regardless of whether they can help you or not. So,
and that age, that 14, 15, 16, that's a perfect age to start visiting and like I love how Cindy describes it, like at the back end tour of of an ice cream place or a back end tour of something. That's a really great age because maybe your teen won't tell you, but maybe if you say, hey, do you want to follow this person around one day and see what he does? That might say, okay, maybe he or she doesn't want to do this, but what, I actually like this part of it, so maybe we'll try another thing. So yeah, offering those experiences, especially in those younger teen years, I think can hopefully open the doors to you learning about, oh, they're really interested in this. Let's go down this road.
Yeah.
Well, and remembering field trips is also for kids that are post-elementary. Yeah. We sort of stop doing the cutesy field trips when they're young. And this goes well beyond the cutesy field trip. This isn't like we're going to go to the fire station and sit in the fire truck. This is really imperative. It helps a kid narrow it down or rule things out. And again, I think that goes for every learner, not just special needs learners or, those with developmental delay, although it may be more important for those that struggle to learn because again, often they're hands-on learners or visual learners and they need to see it to get it. They can't necessarily always picture it in their head. They need to go and be present in the environment and go, oh, this is too loud for me. I don't think I can handle it. Or I love this. So people get to talk while they work. This is great. I would love that. If you got a little chatterbox, there are all kinds of things they can note on site that they would never be able to learn just from talking about, well, this is what they do. Sometimes you got to see it and touch it, and then it clicks or doesn't click, but it's ruling it out is just as good of information as ruling it in. We forget that what we eliminate gives us lots of information too. And using that information guides to the right way. So,
yeah.
Great point. So tell us how people go about getting this wonderful new book that we are all so excited about.
Well, it's available. It's available on Amazon. We have a lovely cover here with a signpost in the road because that's how Cindy and I envision this book to be, is like, here's your signpost. Which way do you want to go? You can purchase it on Amazon, either in paperback or on Kindle. We are working on an audiobook version of it, so hopefully that'll be coming out soon. And just go on to Amazon.com and type in Blazing New Homeschooling Trails.
Okay, y'all. I went to edit this earlier and get rid of there's no trailing involved, people. I don't know what
I
happened.
saw that trailing. I was like,
I don't know what happened. Susan said, that's wrong. And I went to edit it, and I guess I never finished it.
There
Sorry.
you go, Natalie.
That's it. And you know what? The funniest part about this book, I think one of the hardest things was coming up with the title.
It was.
It really was. The title did not come to us until about maybe a month before we were done.
We had 5,000 points to make and no title to call it underneath it.
Well, I love the title.
You guys hit an exciting title on Amazon this week too, because aren't you guys the #1 homeschool book?
We were in Kindle version, we were the #1 new release homeschool book, and our Cindy and I, I check in with her every night, and we are just blown away by the reports. People are buying it, paperback and Kindle, and we're so thankful. I mean, again, this book really, I think to us is a ministry and a mission, and just to help people, to let them know you're not alone. These are different ways we did it. So yeah, if we can just help at least one family, but we're so blessed that it looks like we're hopefully helping more families than we expected. So yeah.
It has the support and the orders of the book have really surprised us, but it also tells us we weren't wrong. There are a lot of families that are in need of some inspiration and a little bit of light on their journey. And, it's a complete privilege and honor to have anybody read your words about your experience and to think that it might be helpful. How can you not be humbled by that one? And it also makes it feel like, I'm going to call it what it was, the suffering that we went through, because it is, you suffer when your kid can't do what others do, and it gets worse and harder and worse and harder. As a parent, we ache, and then when we're fully responsible and we're not turning them over to somebody else to quote unquote fix it, you feel even more responsible. And I say it over and over again, but it's really true for me. If one mom can be spared the discouragement that I had, or can be lifted out of that, I don't care if it's only one. It matters to me. It matters to me. That's what we're here for, right? I mean, all of us are here doing this. We're all doing this work so that other moms feel joined and not alone. None of us are making real money off this. We're doing it because we have a passion for it. We care about people. God calls us to do it. And if I can reach back and help someone, that's what I'm going to do. Because along the way, we really did have people who did that for us and with us as well. And I always feel like the pay it forward concept is exactly what I'm meant to do, and I have a responsibility to do. And if any of the listeners out there read the book and want to reach out to us, don't hesitate. That's what we're here for. We want to help you. If we can answer a question for you, or if you've got a situation with your child and you just don't quite know what to do, throw it out to us. Doesn't mean we're going to know an answer, but we can try and help you think.
We might be able to point you in the right direction.
Yeah. We might be able to send you in this direction and not really have the answer, but it might lead you to someplace. So don't be alone. There's no reason for it. We are here, and so many others are here to help you too. Yeah.
Well, today has been awesome, mamas. I have enjoyed this afternoon with y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah. We don't need to get to
Natalie, thank you.
I know. We just need to. We need to just, I don't know. Somebody tried to plan a homeschool cruise at one time, and
someone did.
Then COVID hit. It'll come back around.
Yeah, it will. It will.
Okay, mamas, we have had a wonderful afternoon with y'all. I don't know where you're watching this at. If you're in the Facebook groups, Cindy and Natalie are in our groups, and you can tag them. It's real easy. You know how Facebook works. You can tag them and ask questions. If you're seeing this through YouTube, you can go to their website, and there should be a contact form there. As always, take time to like, subscribe, comment on the channel. Let us know what you need, and we enjoyed y'all today. Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Natalie.